In this video, I am going to take you through the basic concept and demo of Cribl LogStream. The four main use cases that we see people using LogStream are the ability to route the data to the best tool. For example, LogStream is very good at taking subset of the data to, for example, Splunk, a subset of the data to Elastic, subset of the data to Amazon AWS S3, and the like. So this kind of capabilities of sending the right data to the right tool is a truly unique capabilities of LogStream. The second use case that LogStream excels at is the ability to reduce the data between the sources and the destination. For example, the ability to change logs and event to matrix, or remove all null fields because they really do not add any value, or whenever there is duplication in data, remove some of those events. So that's kind of this is a second use case that we see a lot of people using LogStream. The third one is the ability to collect data from all kind of different data sources. For example, the ability to collect data from S3, from a file system, from Office 365, and even run collectors. In other words, if, for example, you had a security incident and you want to collect the data from an object store, data that was stored there for a year, and you just want information from last year, you can go in and schedule the job, and LogStream can go in, collect that data, and pass it to your tool of choice. Any SIM and any analytic tools can be the target. And the final set of use cases that we see people using LogStream is around enrichment and shaping of the data. For example, you can use LogStream to go in and do lookups, do enrichment as the data pass from LogStream and get manipulated. We can really, for example, take the IP and deduct from that the geo IP or the DNS, and reverse DNS lookup are all part of the enrichment. Transforming of the data is another use case where people are using LogStream to mask the data, to encrypt the data. So it can truly change the shape of the data into something that the analytic tool can leverage. And finally, the ability to do analytics, for example, stats or sum or average are all part of the analytics, so that by the time the analytic tool on the other side sees this data, it could be transformed into a matrix. So those kind of basic use cases are covered by Cribl LogStream. From an architecture point of view, we can see two main parts to Cribl. The master node is the piece of software that really holds the configuration and management for LogStream. The actual worker bees, the piece of software that take that piece of information from Elastic Beats or from Splunk Universal Forwarder and pass it on to AWS S3, to Splunk Enterprise, to Elastic, that is called the worker node. The worker node is part of a worker group, and if you need to process 2 terabytes, or you need to process 2 petabytes through Cribl LogStream, it's just a matter of adding more of these nodes to be able to accomplish the load, the volume that you want to process. From a software point of view, what I'm showing you here is the UI for the master node. The master node, once you log in, it has the capabilities of monitoring all the information that pass through LogStream, sources, destinations, and the like. The second piece of information you can see through the master node is the ability to see the health and the resources that each one of those worker nodes are currently consuming. So that is a really nice capability, because you don't have to log in to any of these worker nodes to see how well they're doing. The master node give us the ability to see the health and actually log in directly from this UI into and drill down into these worker nodes. The third kind of tab that we highlight here is the whole notion of a worker group. A worker group is a set of configuration that mandates the different behavior for the workers themselves. For example, in this case, I have a worker group called AWS. In there, I have one worker, and I have another one called the data center one, and it's specifically for log data. And here I see that I have two worker nodes doing the job, doing the processing. At any given point, you can manipulate, you can configure these workers, this configuration. You can click on the configuration, do all the manipulation. Then once you're ready, once you're done with your changes, you can commit. And once you click on the commit and then deploy, the master node will take the information, put it into a Git, or if you have a remote GitHub, we can push that. And then every 10 seconds or so, the workers themselves will phone home and get the latest and greatest configuration. So as an end user, as an admin, as a developer, you do not have to deal with the workers. You just have to have this UI, the master node UI, and from the master node UI, you can do all the configuration and the manipulation. Next, I'm going to dive into the main concept that allows you to develop these data reduction, data routing, data collection, and data enrichment use cases. Routes, pipelines, sources, collectors, and destinations are the main components that allows you to develop these use cases. This diagram shows very nicely how these four interact with each other. For example, a source will collect the data and send those events to the first route. The first route then filter a subset of the data and send it to a pipeline. A pipeline then, based on functions, will enrich the data, redact the data, or mask the data and send it to a destination. And so as we go from top to bottom, we can see that each route will then filter out its own subset of the data and send it to the appropriate pipeline that will then send the information to the appropriate destination. And with that, let's go back to the master node, and let's start with destinations. In this case, this screen shows us the destinations that are currently available in this version of LogStream. For example, we can click on the Splunk destination and then just pick one of those or create a new one, and we can see quite a lot of options that you can set the Splunk as a destination. For example, there is the whole notion of a back pressure behavior. If, for example, Splunk is down, you can ask LogStream to persist the queue until Splunk is back in operation, and so on and so forth. So those kind of destinations are all available for you to add as the environment grows. You can also increase that kind of the flexibility here. Another environment that I want to highlight here is the whole notion of the capabilities. For example, if you add a destination to AWS S3, you can enable LogStream to send those events to S3 and also extract the timestamp, the source type, so that by the time the data lands in the destination, in this case S3, it will obey based on those rules and fall into the correct S3 bucket. As far as sources, we have quite a lot of enrichment as well. As we mentioned, we can collect from Kafka and Elastic Beats, as well as from syslog. And you can see that as you configure those, you tell us which port, which IP to collect from, and we will send that source into the system, as we mentioned earlier, to the routes. And the last thing I want to highlight here on the left side are the collectors. Collectors are our ability to run, for example, a schedule collection, or run some sort of based on some specific dates. We can go in and ask the collector to go to S3 and collect, if you have, let's say, a security incident, collect the data from January of 2019 and just bring that data set into this historical data set into LogStream, and then pass that data into the appropriate maybe SIEM solution or analytics solution. So that's kind of where collectors are slightly different than sources, where sources will continuously run, where collectors, you are in control when you want to go in and basically collect that historical data. The next thing are routes. What routes allows us to do? Routes allow us to filter the subset of the data, send those events to the appropriate pipeline, and then send that information from the pipeline to the appropriate destination. So that's kind of where route plays an integral part of LogStream. It basically combines source types, filtering, sending those to the functions, and from the function to the destination. And then we have this flag called final, which means that if this flag is turned to yes, we will not send any more of this type of data down to the follow-up routes. And so you, as a developer, can say, I want to send all of my data to S3, and then also send the Palo Alto network data to using that particular route. Of course, at any given point, you can change the order. For example, you want to have a different behavior. So that's where route really combine that kind of sources, destination, and pipeline into one unique way of executing it from the top all the way to the bottom. Next are pipelines. Pipelines are a set of functions that allows us to manipulate those events. For example, in this case, I have the Palo Alto firewall pipeline to enrich the data that came to us from a syslog. So those functions are all available as part of LogStream, and it really gives us the ability to really do the data manipulations. And the very first thing I'm going to kind of take us through is a little demonstration of data reduction in action. So for that, I'm going to go to a group on the AWS group and click on the trim JSON pipeline. The trim JSON pipeline has one function we called a parser. And as I'm showing you this demonstration, I'm going to leverage another very important concept of LogStream, and that is the ability to go in and capture data for testing. You can obviously attach subset of the data or paste your data in here, but we can truly take this particular source type and then ask LogStream to capture this data, and then we, as the people that manipulate this data, can then go in and save this as a sample file. And once we save it as a sample file, we can then go in and test our functions against this type of data set. And so, for example, in this case, I already saved a sample file called trim.bigjson.log. And on the way in, before the parser has manipulated the data, we can see what the data looks like, as well as we can see what happens once the parser has manipulated the data. We can see in orange is all the events that we changed, modified. In red, all the fields that we actually removed. And in green, the field that we added to those events. And so as I'm looking through the details of this parser, we can tell that in this case, I asked LogStream to basically break this JSON object, extract it, manipulate it, and then reserialize it, and then put the data back into the raw events, as well as from data reduction point of view, I asked LogStream to go in, and if I see a field called multi-value headers, which we can see it right here, I asked LogStream to remove that data from the event. Also, I asked LogStream to go in, and if we see a value which is null and it does not add any actual analytic value add to the analytic tool, I also asked LogStream to remove this data set, which gives us the ability to look at the basic statistics. In other words, what these actions of removing the multi-value header and removing all null values really gives us. And in this case, we can see very clearly that we were able to reduce around 44% of the volume, which can have a significant value to analytic tools like Elastic and Splunk and the like. Also, as we are in this mode of testing our capture, we can add, let me also remove anything that starts with request context. So I type request context, just C, uppercase. I added that to fields to be removed. I then save this additional capabilities. And then we can see that LogStream immediately shows you that at this point, this should not be part of the payload that we will send downstream. And also, if we click on the basic statistics, we can see that just by adding this particular field to our field to be removed, we are now can save 65% of our payload before we send this payload downstream. So that's kind of these kind of capabilities, as well as the capabilities around the capabilities of, or the functions around suppressing the data. In other words, this is very similar to deduplication, can be a great value add to data reduction, sampling, basically give me 1 out of 10 events, 1 out of every 5 events before you send it downstream. That's another great use case for, great function for data reduction use cases, dynamic sampling, dropping events altogether. If, for example, they do not meet your requirement, you can drop those events. There's quite a lot of capabilities within the tool, within LogStream, to do data reduction. A second use case is along the lines of data enrichment. For that, I'm going to take a look at the Palo Alto firewall traffic that we saw earlier. In this case, we see several functions. For example, one function we call that the GeoIP, a function that allows us to enrich the data by looking at the Palo Alto network firewall. We can look for source IP and destination IP, and by feeding it through a lookup table, we then can match the source IP with the source GeoIP, as well as the destination IP can now give us the GeoIP location. So that's kind of enrichment using the lookups, or using the ability to do DNS and reverse DNS. In other words, capture the host name for those IPs, and kind of really giving us an enrichment capabilities is very much part of the capabilities of LogStream. And in this case, we also see a little bit more of a little more complex pipeline that really has some sort of indenting and grouping and the like. So that's kind of where the pipeline can really help us, as we said, add those functions and then check those functions against a capture data that we can then see the results. And the last pipeline I want to highlight is around data masking. And in this case, if we look at the capabilities of LogStream, LogStream can extract your data, your sensitive data. For example, if you have a social security number, we can mask that data. If you have a credit card, or if you have the ESN number, you can encrypt that data. And in any given point, we can go in and look at the appropriate log. In this case, the appropriate log is under sensitive data, and as we write this extraction and as we write these masking capabilities, we can see the feedback that LogStream gives us right away from taking that social security number, which is in the clear, and send that to a masked, and so that we know before we send that data downstream to your SIM solution or to your analytics solution or to your IT solution, we can definitely mask that data and give us that kind of capabilities around all of data enrichment, data reduction, and and data manipulations. And to summarize what we saw so far, LogStream allows us to collect terabytes of data, manipulate the information that comes between the sources and the destinations, and with the combinations of routes, pipelines, and capture sample data, validate our assumptions, and finally, LogStream allows us to deploy all of the configurations to the workers who are going to process this end to end. With that, I just want to say thank you for listening and have a great day.